Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we are looking at a critical turning point on the Russian southern front in Ukraine. The destruction of a strategic land bridge has left Russian forces disorganized, strained, and vulnerable. The collapse of key supply routes and logistical lines is exposing weaknesses that were previously hidden and is reshaping the dynamics of the conflict in the south. The southern front stretches across Crimea, Kherson, and Zaporizhia. Russia's military operations here have relied heavily on a land corridor from Crimea into southern Ukraine. This corridor enabled the movement of troops, equipment, fuel, and supplies. When the corridor is disrupted, the front-line positions and operations are immediately affected. A key factor in this disruption has been the repeated targeting of the Crimean Bridge, also known as the Kerch Bridge. Explosions in 2022 and 2023 caused significant damage to road and rail sections. While Russia has tried to keep the bridge operational, its capacity has been severely limited. Analysts note that this makes resupply from Russia into Crimea and the south far more difficult, creating logistical bottlenecks that ripple across the front. The importance of this land bridge goes beyond the bridge itself. Roads, rail links, and river crossings all form a network that allows the Russian army to function effectively. When any section is destroyed or compromised, it affects the entire chain. This vulnerability is magnified when Ukrainian forces focus on these targets, forcing Russia into reactive measures instead of proactive operations. The consequences of these disruptions are clear. Russian troops are experiencing delays in receiving ammunition, fuel, and other essentials. Offensive operations slow or stall. Defensive positions become harder to maintain without steady supply lines. Commanders face increased uncertainty as they try to coordinate units across a stretched and fragile network. Specific examples underline the problem. The Antonivka road bridge over the Dnipro River in Kherson Oblast has been repeatedly damaged and repaired. Russian forces have had to rely on ferries and secondary crossings, which slow movement and reduce efficiency. Even small interruptions in critical transport links can have major operational effects. The water supply situation in Crimea adds another layer of stress. Since Ukraine blocked the North Crimean Canal in 2014, Russia has struggled to maintain a stable water source. This dependency on limited infrastructure makes the region's military logistics more vulnerable. Ukraine's strategy has focused on exploiting these weaknesses. By targeting bridges, transport hubs, and supply nodes, Ukrainian forces force Russian units into defensive postures and slow their momentum. The attacks do not always involve direct combat, but create operational pressure by reducing Russian mobility and resupply capability. This disruption has both practical and psychological effects. Troops facing shortages experience lower morale, while commanders are forced to reconsider offensive plans. Public statements claiming that the infrastructure remains functional are often at odds with the operational reality on the ground, affecting perception both domestically and internationally. Russian forces still hold territory and have defensive capabilities, but their southern front is under strain. Supply constraints limit the depth of operations, making positions more vulnerable to Ukrainian counterattacks. The loss of reliable supply lines also forces Russia to divert resources from other areas to secure what remains, further weakening their operational flexibility. The strategic implications are significant. The South, which was once considered a relatively secure axis due to geography and prior control of Crimea, is now a source of vulnerability. Russia's ability to use Crimea as a staging ground for southern operations is limited, and Ukrainian forces gain increased freedom to dictate operational tempo. Potential outcomes depend on how Russia adapts. Repairing bridges and rerouting supply is possible, but these measures are slower, costlier, and less efficient than the original land bridge network. Sea and air transport provide alternatives, but cannot match the volume or reliability of the main corridor. The current state of the Southern Front highlights a key principle of modern warfare. Logistics are as important as firepower. Even a numerically strong army can be constrained if supply lines are disrupted. Ukraine's focus on infrastructure and supply nodes demonstrates a strategic approach that maximizes impact without necessarily engaging in large-scale frontal attacks. This situation also underscores how localized disruptions can have wide-reaching effects. Damage to a single bridge or corridor can cascade into operational difficulties across a large region. Russian command and control, troop morale, and frontline resilience are all affected when supply chains are compromised. Overall, the Southern Front for Russia is in disarray. Logistics problems, vulnerable supply lines, and pressure from Ukrainian forces have shifted the balance. Russia is no longer able to operate with the same level of freedom and efficiency it enjoyed in the early stages of the conflict. The outcome of this disruption is not final, but the operational window for Russian advances is narrowing. Ukrainian forces continue to exploit weaknesses, while Russian units are forced into defensive and reactive postures. The strategic advantage in the south is increasingly moving in Ukraine's favor. The Southern Front demonstrates how modern conflicts rely heavily on infrastructure and supply networks. Success is not measured only by territory held, but by the ability to sustain operations over time. Russian logistical challenges show that even well-equipped forces can be hindered if their lifelines are compromised. Moving forward, the critical question is whether Russia can secure alternative supply lines and stabilize the Southern Front. Until then, Ukraine has the opportunity to maintain pressure, exploit vulnerabilities, and shape the battlefield according to its operational priorities. The disruption of the land bridge has exposed the fragility of Russian positions in the south. Russian units face a combination of logistical bottlenecks, operational constraints, and psychological strain. Ukrainian forces, by contrast, have been able to dictate actions and maintain initiative through targeted infrastructure attacks. In conclusion, the destruction and repeated targeting of the land bridge linking Crimea to southern Ukraine has thrown the Russian Southern Front into significant disarray. Supply issues, defensive strain, and operational limitations are redefining the theater. Ukraine's strategy of targeting logistics and infrastructure demonstrates the effectiveness of focusing on weak points rather than relying solely on massed assaults. The Southern Front is no longer a stronghold for Russia, but a contested and vulnerable region, with long-term implications for the broader conflict.